Ambassador?
What do you want?
The council meeting, the emergency session.
The council can go to hell. And the emergency session can go to hell. And you can go to hell too. I wouldn't want you to feel left out. Hmm?
Hi, I'm Rachel.
And I'm Matt.
And this is...
We are all cut. I struggled to remember, and then I remembered, and then I started laughing halfway through saying it.
And this is...
We are all Kosh.
A Babylon 5 rewatch. Right.
Season 1.
Episode 1. Midnight on the Firing Line. I love how poetic the episode titles are. Some of them are very straight. They're like, this is the one where people die. And it's like the dying people, the episode. And some of them are like real esoteric and poetic. And I miss episode titles.
Yeah. Because you don't interact with them enough for them to be memorable anymore.
No, they don't show up on the screen. They're just like, oh, sometimes they do. Sometimes they do, but they're like, they don't show up on the screen. They're in the streaming title.
Right.
I don't know. I miss the chapter title at the beginning of every episode when they were like, okay, so you sat down, you appointment watched this. You want to make sure this is an episode you haven't already seen. So let's go ahead and tell you which one it is.
Right. Yeah, and it's almost like you're sitting down and preparing like logging it in your brain. Here's the episode I'm watching.
Yeah.
Like, here's the book I'm reading.
It's not like you could pull up the details. You couldn't pause it and go to the x-ray screen. You couldn't go back to the list and make sure you're watching the correct episode. You were literally like, the TV guide entry might say Babylon 5.
Right, but not the episode name.
It didn't give you shit. So you had to sit down and be like, okay, what am I watching? Let's wait and see. That's also why
we've crossed the threshold of communicating useful metadata.
Yeah.
And now we're not communicating enough because it's available in other places, but those other places have extra effort to view them.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, anyway, this is season 1, episode 1.
Once we all have our brain implants, it'll be a lot easier.
Yeah. Okay, that's going to happen. We just had a discussion about how when we podcast, we wear headphones. And I've seen a lot of recent commentary. Like, why do podcasters wear headphones? Do you really need to hear yourself? Yes, correct. I do. I do need to hear myself. I need to be reassured that I'm showing up.
I'm not uncomfortable with hearing myself, and it's helpful.
It's helpful because I know I'm being recorded. And it's like the millennial pause. I'm never not going to pause at the beginning of a video.
It's a fundamental distrust in the technology.
I need to make sure that the tape is literally rolling, okay? Like, I need to give it a minute. I am old, okay? I have to have reassurance that this is working because...
Yes, the red light turned on and it's staying on.
And do you think I check during podcast episodes? You were correct. I do. I look over occasionally and I'm like, yep, because I've had it where it stopped on me.
Yep.
And so I don't have a fundamental level of trust in the technology.
I would say blind trust.
In the
technology.
Yeah, I have a reasonable amount of trust. But I don't know. We come from a different experience. We come from a different lived experience than people that have lived with technology that feels now ubiquitous, which to us feels brand new still.
Right. And there's a psychological term that I don't remember it, but it's for technology. And when you interact with technology, you need it to work like a light switch.
Yeah.
Because a light switch is one of the most like proven, reliable, like experienced as ultimately all reliable. If you flick the light switch on, the light's going to turn on.
Right.
And for like when people talk about IoT devices, like Internet of Things, like all these mini devices all over the place, the biggest hurdle for those devices being integrated into a household is they need to work as
Like a light
reliably
switch, yeah.
as a light switch, which is like 99.9999, like 6 nines of reliability,
Yeah.
which is like a person could live their entire life and experience 0 failures in that technology interacting with it.
Right.
And the devices aren't there yet. They're getting closer. They're getting a lot closer. So you and I, people of our generation, when we were interacting with like standalone devices, the reliability was far below 6 nines of reliability.
Correct.
But for someone who's maybe like 20, 25 years old, they may be at like 99.999, like 5 nines of reliability.
Yeah.
And so they've experienced so few failures in these standalone devices that they have this fundamental level of trust that, yep, it worked.
Yeah.
Anyway, on to the episode.
I mean, I'm just saying, I remember when the caption machine was on the outside of the TV. So we start this episode. This is a year after the gathering. So the gathering was the year 2257. And now it is the year 2258. And the name of the place
is Babylon 5.
But we start with a cold open. I love a good cold open. I miss cold opens. The hook.
Yes.
This is going to keep you watching this entire episode. And it is some sort of colony, some sort of space station orbiting a planet. And a jump gate opens. And ships come out. And
a whole bunch of ships.
Yeah, and blow up some shit. And oh no, somebody's being invaded. And this is Ragesh 3. We know that because we get like a little thing at the bottom that's like beep, 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 beep. Ragesh 3, like
and we can tell
Centauri colony.
By the weird hair that this is a Centauri colony.
It's not weird, honey. It's just not our culture. It's always interesting to me because we never actually discuss whether their hair just grows like that or whether that is a thing that they affect.
Yeah, if they just style it that way.
If they I do think they don't have hair in the front of their heads because the women don't have any hair in the front of their heads. They only have like ponytails.
Right.
They don't get to have any kind of a crest.
Right.
But the crest length is a symbol of your status,
your position in the hierarchy.
Right, which means either it grows like that and you have to keep it clipped short.
It's a patriarchyometer.
How useful that would be to be able to tell how much of a dick somebody was going to be by the, you know what? You kind of can. You kind of can. Now that I say that out loud, I'm like, oh yeah, there's definitely like that guy's going to be a douchebag. I could tell by his hair. Except it's much more codified in Centauri society.
Right.
Yeah. It's just
it's
how
one
much
single metric.
Yeah.
But we never see them styling their hair.
No.
Oh, hold on. I'm having a little memory tickle of of seeing Londo like fluffing the curl at the end of his crest. But I may just be imagining that.
The most we do is that later he is confronted with people in a higher position who have chosen to have shorter hair. And that's about as close as it gets. And also later his wig is going to get much less. I definitely gel this up in the morning and more like this is a way that my hair grows and it looks much more intentional. And that's not till season 2. But I love that they were like, what if, I'm just spitballing here. They all went full flock of seagulls and we just sprayed their hair up. Like, and they were like, yeah, okay, that's fine. And I don't know. I feel like the main actors who are in it frequently get a wig for this, and everybody else just had to submit to having their hair gel up. Because we meet Karn Malari, who is ostensibly on a similar sociological level with Londo, because he is his nephew, and so he's definitely part of the same family. And family is very important to the Centauri, and they all sort of share a social strata. So if one falls, they all fall kind of thing.
Right.
And yet he has very short hair.
I think partly it's age and partly it's Londo has Londo as as a member of his family has ascended in position.
But he pulls everybody up.
Right. But
Yeah.
it may not extend to his brother's family.
I don't know.
I don't know.
Just a note. Isn't that interesting? He had short hair.
I wonder why. Maybe he's one of these violate the purity codes, not the morality codes people, and he's cutting his hair shorter.
I don't know. Maybe the Narn cut his hair short as a shame tactic.
Ooh,
could be.
I like it.
I like that. Pretty much every species gets their own exclamation. So Londo's is great maker. And so they say that in here. He goes, great maker. Tell them we're under attack. Tell them it's the and then they blow up. And that's the end of the cold open. So we get to see a shot of the ship coming by. So we know who attacks them, if you know the ship design.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much it. That's the opening. And then we go through the voiceover, which is now done by Sinclair.
Yep. Instead of, it was Londo before.
And the theme song, which was definitely my ringtone for a really long time because it's really good. In fact, when I commissioned the theme song for We Are All Kosh, I just sent him a YouTube video of the intro song, and he was like, "So, do you just want me to make this a synthwave?" Or I was like inspired by, but not exactly like. And he was like, "Okay, cool." So,
yeah,
I really I liked how our theme song turned out. Mm-hmm. But when we cut to Babylon 5, this is our Ivanova, our first moment meeting Ivanova. I'm going to say that every character is my favorite character at one point or another. This is a theme of mine, which is if I love a show, I pretty much love everybody in it. But I feel like the transition from Lieutenant Commander Takashima to Ivanova is such a good, no shade on Takashima, but Ivanova.
I think Claudia Christian as Ivanova stepped into her character with full attitude.
Yeah.
And even Garibaldi and Sinclair, in the pilot, it almost felt like they were more comfortable in their characters. And this episode, Garibaldi and Sinclair feel a little wooden.
Oh, interesting.
But, Londo, G'Kar, and Ivanova are there.
Yeah.
Full attitude.
Like Ivanova. She has a great character arc. I love everybody in this show. I feel like Ivanova resonates very well with you. Yeah, I feel I don't know why you would say that. And anyway, she just does a really good job, and she ends up consistently getting moved through her character arc just by being resolutely herself.
Yeah.
Which I deeply love in a character.
Yeah.
So she's looking for Commander Sinclair. So she walks up to Garibaldi and she's like, I can't get a hold of him. His link is off. And he's like, oh yeah, that means he's in the observation dome. And she's like, well, no, nothing's happening right now.
It's offline. There's nothing going on.
And he's like, yeah, that's why he's there.
That's the fucking point.
That's the fucking point. And she's like, oh, okay, cool. So she leaves. And then we hear, Mr. Garibaldi from Londo.
Mr. Garibaldi!
And he turns around like, oh, God. And I love this whole interaction because it really, really sets up the way that Garibaldi interacts with all of the ambassadors, which is a very, I am your friend until you hit the line. And I'm very clear about the line. And as long as we're nowhere near the line, we can fuck around and we can have fun.
Right.
We can
do shenanigans.
Yeah, we can. But then once you hit the line is hit.
Right. But I have responsibilities.
Right.
And I do not compromise on my responsibilities.
Right. I'm friendly, but I am not necessarily always your friend.
Right.
Because he's like, trust me, which we know nobody trusts Londo. Nobody ever trusts Londo. And Garibaldi goes, my brain will be 5 days dead before I trust a Centauri. Remember when you claimed we were related when we first met you?
I love this very organic info dump.
Yeah.
About how the Centauri and the humans met.
Oh, that's J. Michael Straczynski's masterstroke. Is
Yeah.
the way that he gives us information about the world. He gives us information about the universe and about the interconnectedness
and it's
of the
all
species.
believable dialogue.
Right, without having to have a, let's sit down, kids, and have a story time about how we met the Centauri. From this interaction, we learned that they were one of the first races that we met.
Mm-hmm.
That they developed rapport with us by claiming to be a distant relation because we look vaguely similar, except for the hair, which maybe they don't explain the hair because they want us to keep guessing.
Yeah.
And that they're in no way related at all, and that they're definitely shysters. Like it's because he goes, it was a clerical error, clerical error, and he's like, a clerical error, and he's like, yeah, we thought you were beta 9, turns
But
out
you
you
were
were
beta 12.
Yeah, like whatever, we wrote it down wrong, and not my problem. Here, open my wrist. He goes, you don't have any major arteries in your wrist. And he's like, of course we don't. What do you think I am, stupid? Like. And then Veer shows up. I love Veer.
Everybody gets a
Their
diplomatic
attaché.
attaché.
Yes. And everybody will have a consistent attaché except G'Kar,
Right.
whose attachés keep meeting with mysterious deaths.
Which is so fitting.
But he goes, Veer. And later he'll call him the moon-faced assassin of joy. And that's what I always think of when I see Veer. He goes,
It's because he can literally say whatever he wants to Veer, and Veer is both professionally and socially obligated
yeah.
to stay close to Londo and act subserviently towards Londo. So Londo has no reason not to badmouth Veer.
Right.
He needs a scapegoat. He just needs to vent. Veer,
Yeah.
you moon-faced assassin of joy.
And all of the attaché characters are going to get, well, except G'Kar's because they change out so frequently,
Right.
but they're all going to be fully fleshed out characters.
Yes.
There are no throwaway characters in Babylon 5, except sometimes the Monster of the Weeks.
Right.
But that's one of the things that I really enjoy about it is you can't take any character or any interaction for granted. It's not thrown out there at random. There's usually a reason. But he shows up and he's like, Garibaldi, have you met my diplomatic staff? Recently sent to me by the homeworld. This is it. This is just Veer. Veer's my entire diplomatic staff. He is a ambassador on what is theoretically like the place for diplomacy in the universe. And the homeworld sent him a secretary.
Right. So an important thing to learn about Londo is how high in the hierarchy he really is.
Yeah.
Because he's like single digits in line for the throne.
Right.
And he's the ambassador.
Yeah.
Because he's kind of too influential on Homeworld. He's too threatening to the throne.
Right.
Because he's so close to the throne and he's so influential. They had to kick him out to Babylon 5 to, I guess, keep him out of their hair. And so Londo is way more important. Like any Centauri that's going to show up on the station, Londo's going to be more important than them.
Sometimes,
on
but they
Homeworld.
still shit on him, which is
Right, because
key here.
right, there's his like the royalty position, nobility, I would say.
Yeah.
Then his nobility position, and then his professional position. His professional position is way lower than his
Yeah.
nobility.
Well, the constant
position.
disconnect between what he wants the Centauri Republic to be and
Right.
what the Centauri Republic actually is this really great motivator for a lot of his actions. It kind of feels like in Babel, which we read by Kwong,
Oh yes, R.F. Kuang.
where the magic lies in the difference between the thing and the translation of the thing.
Yes.
So his power, his narrative thrust really lies in the difference between what he wants his republic to be and what his republic actually is.
Yeah.
And it's a great space for him to have all of this organic.
Right. There's all this
Yeah.
conflict. There's all this tension between people treating him as his job and him treating them from a position of high nobility.
Yeah.
And the conflict there. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a lot to play with.
But Veer has shown up to tell him that Ragesh 3 is under attack. He's like, oh no, Ragesh 3 is under attack. And Londo is immediately upset by this, obviously, because this is an act of an aggression against his republic, his dear republic, which he always calls it. We come back to him having a quick meet and greet with Sinclair, where he's like, what does Earth know about this? Did you guys know about this? And they're like, no, Londo, nobody knew shit. And then Delenn walks in with G'Kar, and they're like, oh no, we just heard. This is really terrible.
And this
G'Kar's
is our
like,
first
yes,
look
horrible.
at Delenn's new makeup.
Thank God.
Without all the like facial prosthetics.
I honestly think somebody in...
Well, I guess the jawline cheek prosthetics.
It kind of feels like somebody in the makeup tent was threatened by how beautiful Mira Furlan was. And they were like, what if we just butch this up a little bit?
Yeah.
And then they were like, what if, and I'm just spitballing here, we let her be herself? And they were like, okay, fucking fine. I love Delenn. Like, I love the character of Delenn. I love Delenn.
Is Delenn your favorite character also?
Maybe. It's not hard to have a lot of favorite characters when a show is this good. So I regret nothing and I apologize for nothing. So they all show up and Sinclair's like, okay, well, great. I'm glad we've all had this quick little powwow, but let's call a session because actually there's more people who get a say in this than
There's more people in the room.
Because there's also the League of Non-Aligned Worlds, which is our new addition to the group.
The council, yeah.
Yeah, the council. And then we get our first introduction of the B plot, which sometimes the B plot will be completely unrelated. It will be for comedic relief because everything else that is happening is so dramatic and so awful and so difficult that we need that little bit of levity in the episode. And sometimes it will be related, but you're not sure how. And this is one of those ones that's eventually going to be related at the end. But right now, it just feels like a look over here. And it's the raiders. There's raiders that are attacking people. And I'm going to note when the plot comes up, but I don't really feel like until the end it's worthwhile talking about.
Right.
It just occupies Garibaldi's time. He's spending this entire episode trying to figure out
Right.
how they know where to find them.
It gives us scenes with Garibaldi in the episode.
Right. And then we meet Talia Winters, who is our new telepath. And she's the replacement for Lita.
Yep.
And she's trying to check in with Ivanova, but every time she shows up, Ivanova's just like, yes, great, love you, fuck off. Fuck off. And Talia's like, I feel like we've gotten off on the wrong foot. She's like, no, it's the correct foot. It was the one I meant to put forward. You can now fuck off. Fuck off. That's Ivanova's entire vibe.
Good. Confirmed message received. Thank you.
Yeah.
Get out of here.
Actually, what she says is because she is in the command and control, like she's in the CNC.
Yeah.
And Talia shows up and she's like, well, I figured I'd come to where you work because you keep avoiding me. And she's like, yes, well, I'm in the middle of 15 things and all of them are annoying. So fuck off.
Excuse me, but I'm in the middle of 15 things, all of them annoying.
So Talia politely fucks off because she can read the room. She's a telepath.
She can literally read the room. Yeah. She can feel the vibes.
Yes.
The vibes are off.
The vibes were not immaculate. And then we find out it's election day and it is Luis Santiago versus Marie Crane.
Yep.
Interesting.
How
Yeah.
appropriate.
Yeah. Then we come back and it's Sinclair talking to Ivanova because Ivanova and Sinclair are kind of having a quick little powwow. Who could have done this? Who could have taken over Ragesh 3? I feel like everybody probably knows, but they're all just trying to be like, well, maybe it's not the Narn. Let's give them the benefit of the doubt. Maybe it's somebody else. And so Sinclair's like, well, I don't think it was the Minbari. They're too honorable. And Ivanova goes, well, I kind of, I'm surprised that you're talking about them like that because you fought in the war versus the Minbari. You literally watched them slaughter innocent colonists. Interesting that you mentioned that they're honorable. And he's like, well, you know, the best way to learn about somebody is to piss them off and to fight them.
You find out who they really are.
And I did that. So I feel like I have a pretty good handle on who the Minbari are. And he says a line that I really like, which is why I included this section, which is, Ignore the propaganda. Focus on what you see.
Yeah.
So there's propaganda about the Minbari, but what I've seen is that they always act honorably. So I don't think this was them. A sneak attack doesn't sound like them. Showing up in force, announcing that the Minbari and that now they're going to kill you, that I can see.
Right.
So then they pivot to the election. And Sinclair's like, well, who are you voting for? Have you voted yet? Who are you voting for? And she's like, well, I think I'm going to vote for Marie Crane. Because I've always believed a leader should have a strong chin. And Luis Santiago has no chin. And his vice president has several. And this, to me, does not feel like a good combination. Thank you, Ivanova. That is the kind of political commentary I like to see. Then we cut to Veer and Londo because they have finally received a transmission from Ragesh 3 to show them what happened. Like, they've gotten the security footage, basically.
Yeah.
And so they put it on. And I love the tiny little... This was about as big of an LCD screen as you could buy during this time.
Right. So, note on technology in the ship. All the screens are flat screens.
Yeah.
At the time, you could get a CRT, the cathode ray tube TV, with a flat screen, but they were a lot more expensive than the curved screen.
And they were real thick. They were real deep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so whenever we see a flat screen that is bigger than about, 6 inches by 6 inches, it's built into the wall.
Yeah.
So that the CRT box is not visible. So it looks like just
a flat screen.
Our modern TVs just attached to the wall or built into the wall. But yeah, anytime it's in something that's too small to actually hold a CRT box, it's it's one of two things. It's either these, at the time, really, really expensive LCD screens, or it's a green screen and they
added it
they
on.
superimpose the video in post.
I have a feeling they didn't because the size is so small.
Well, with the green screen effect, that's what they did in the pilot.
Yeah.
When we see the here's the info about the person that went through whatever. That was green screen done in post, which maybe they didn't buy any mini LCDs for the pilot.
Well, it's like, remember how much LEDs were when they were first created? Like a single LED could cost $10,000.
Right.
And now I can buy a strip of them at Walmart for $20.
Right. Yeah, when they were making them in like Bell Labs or whatever in the 70s.
Yeah, flat screens used to be astronomically expensive.
Yeah.
And they probably bought two and they moved them from set to set.
Yeah.
What it
reused
looks
them
like.
a lot.
Yeah, that's why his little screen is so small. But they put it on and they're watching it and it gets to the part where the ship flies past, which we saw at the beginning, and he goes, stop, enhance, which I love a good CSI enhance. They go boop, 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 and it blows it up, and it's obviously a Narn heavy fighter.
Mm-hmm.
And he goes, a Narn heavy fighter, G'Kar! The best possible decision that could have been made for these two characters is that they gave both of them capes. Londo is almost always wearing his cape.
Yeah.
G'Kar is sometimes wearing his cape, but he always acts as if he is wearing a cape.
Oh, you can tell. I think you can tell more with G'Kar than with Londo that Andreas Katsulas is a theater actor.
Yeah.
And whenever he's wearing a cape,
the cape is... There are elaborate costumes that will wear an actor.
Mm-hmm.
That is not what is happening here. These two have the most elaborate costumes of anyone in the entire show.
G'Kar has the most elaborate prosthetics.
Yeah.
Of any main character.
And they do not wear him.
No.
No. Not,
he rocks
not
the suit.
Yeah, completely.
Yeah.
Completely. I was about to say, and I love that, but I was like, do I? I do. I do. Not that I don't love it, but did I want to say it? I did. I did want to say it. And there I said it. And then we get a little bit, boop, boop, Raiders. Okay, just right here. We'll just boop that in there. A little bit more of the Raider plot. The most important part here is that G'Kar and Londo face off in what is now the Zocalo. If you watch The Gathering, it says like marketplace.
Yeah.
And now it's like 3 alien characters,
Right.
but it's the Zocalo. And G'Kar is sitting there eating spoo. I don't know what spoo is, but he's like, would you like some
It's
spoo?
a prop.
It's particularly fresh today. And Londo goes, oh, is it fresh? And he spits on it. And G'Kar just drops his piece back in it. And he's like, oh, yeah, let's go.
My bait worked.
And he's like, yeah, you guys are the ones.
That was an emotional bid from G'Kar to Londo to have Londo insult him.
Yeah.
And
it worked.
Londo took the emotional bid.
Yeah. And Londo's like, oh, yeah, so the Narn are the ones that took over Ragesh 3. Did you know that? And G'Kar's like, oh my God, I just heard about that myself.
It must be a misunderstanding.
Yeah. That's terrible. It's awful. And Londo's like, what could you possibly want with them? They're unarmed civilians. And he goes, it's really funny, but we thought the same thing when you guys invaded our entire homeworld and subjugated us. It's just really weird.
Wow.
And he goes, the wheel turns, does it not?
You bastard. You won't get away with this. We'll strike back, and we'll strike back hard.
I assume you're referring to the attack on Ragesh 3 by our forces. Just found out about it myself. I'm sure there's a reasonable explanation.
What reasonable explanation is there for the slaughter of unarmed civilians?
Curious, we wondered the same thing when you invaded our world. The wheel turns, does it not, Ambassador?
Londo goes, we should have killed you all when we had the chance. And G'Kar goes, what happened? Did you run out of small children to butcher? And they go at it. And G'Kar ends with a shot that's basically like, it's our turn now, bitch. So sleep lightly because it's our turn to fight back at you.
Right.
Like the hallmark of trauma is the desire to pass it on.
The compulsion.
The compulsion to pass it on.
Yeah.
And we're about to pass on some trauma.
And I love that both of these characters they live in a world where this thing happened, but neither of them would have participated in it. I guess like it's mostly on the Centauri side. I feel like Londo would have argued against invading the Narns.
Yeah.
Because he's a lot more principled than many of the Centauri.
I think base level Londo would have. I don't know if Ambassador Londo Malari would have. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because in the end, he is all about his republic.
Right. He's about the republic, but he's not about a cruel occupation.
Yeah.
He doesn't want to cause harm. He wants to build everything up to be greater. Although there is the is it the next episode with the religious ceremony stuff?
It's another couple episodes, yeah.
Okay.
Parliament of Dreams. So then Commander Sinclair and Londo are talking about how Londo knows how he will die. And this is a very important interaction. Tie a red string off right here. Boop.
Here's a plot line that does not get resolved for a very long time.
But you want to just kind of stick a pin in it because he's telling Sinclair that his people have a way, and they have a way of knowing how they will die. It comes to them in a dream.
And sometimes when.
And it comes to them in a dream. And he says that he had a dream that 20 years from now, when he's an old man, he will die with someone's hands wrapped around his neck and his hands wrapped around theirs. And as soon as he saw G'Kar, he knew that that was the guy who was going to kill him.
He's going to die with himself and G'Kar strangling each other to death.
Yeah.
Resulting in Londo's death.
Right.
Yeah.
And Sinclair's like, well, I mean, 20 years is a long time, long enough for things to change. And he's like, well, maybe. But in 20 years, one of us will be wiser and older, or one of us will be dead. And I guess we'll just have to wait and see.
And I think he brings it up again later. Like it gets referenced a few times through the seasons. And he's like, no, this is a thing. You can't change it.
Well, he can change. Yeah. Well, he does say, I'm on track for my appointment 20 years from now.
Right. Like deep down.
I definitely don't think it's a set in stone thing. I think it's if nothing changes, this is how I will die.
Oh, okay. I had it interpreted as from watching Babylon 5 before, that they do view it as a very fixed thing.
I mean, they may, but every once in a while he'll be like, well, I'm on track still, I guess. Yeah. And I wonder, I've always wondered, is this like a Londo pontificating thing? Because one, no other Centauri references this.
Right.
And also, how wild would it be to have an entire race of people that know how they will die? So in any given situation, they know they're going to be okay.
Right.
Like, oh no, I'll take this ship because I know I die on a planet. So as long as I'm in this spaceship, everything's going to be fine. I can't die.
At the end of this episode, I was thinking, Londo probably knows deep down that this attempt on G'Kar is not going to work.
Yeah.
Because he knows that they're going to be strangling each other in 20 years.
Yeah.
So, like, is he really all that committed? Like, maybe that's why he's so forceful about being able to go through with it and trying to get past Garibaldi, is because, well, it's not going to work anyway.
It might be. Remember that book we read, The Day Tripper?
Mm-hmm.
And it's a book where this guy is living his life out of order. And he can change things that happen, but the effort to change a fixed event is really great.
Yeah.
So it may be that
to build up momentum.
Right. It may be that the effort to change that perceived future is so
it's possible
great.
To change it.
It's possible, but
you really have to try.
Yeah, you have to really commit to it. That would make a lot of sense.
Yeah.
But what we find out is that Londo's nephew was on Ragesh 3. This is Karn Malari. Mm-hmm. And that Londo is the one that put him there because Karn wanted to join the military. Londo felt that was beneath him. And so he had him assigned to the Ragesh 3 colony, thinking it was so small and
in a
so
higher position than he would have gotten.
Yeah, that he would be safe there.
Yep.
And it turned out it was not. And Commander Sinclair is like, well, don't give up yet. Like, we can find the peace here. We can figure out a way to make peace. And Londo gets this fucking great line. He goes, please, bitch, please. On the subject of galactic peace, I am long past innocence and fast approaching apathy. And he goes, it's all a game. It's just a paper fantasy of names and borders, which is effectively what Delenn will say later, where she's like, where does it end? You kill them. Oh, they kill you and take your land. You kill them and take the land back. And then you kill them again and get the land back. Like, it's a cycle of hatred. Where does it end? Mm-hmm. Which is effectively the theme for this episode, which is, what is the point? That Ragesh 3 was a Narn colony. It has been a Centauri colony for 100 years. When is it no longer a previously Narn colony? At what point? Because the Narn had to find it and claim it. Mm-hmm. And so the Centauri found it and took it from the Narn. When does it actually become... I mean, a homeworld is one thing. If the Narn have a homeworld, which they do, that's one thing.
Right.
But just a colony, a planet...
Right, yeah. If your planet of origin, you belong to the planet you originated on as much as the planet you originated on belongs to you.
Yeah.
Right. There's more of a claim to that. But like if you traveled to another planet and claimed it and made it habitable, whatever, and then someone comes and takes it from you, there's still a claim, but it's...
Yeah. It's a paper fantasy.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's all it is.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, I love the neatly folded in commentary.
Oh, yeah.
And the less than just surface level way that these, casually, this feels very surface level. Oh no, Ragesh 3, our special made up space name has been taken over by our other special made up space name. Mm-hmm. And if you are the type of person who wants to interact with this shallowly, it can feel shallow, or you can really dive. And that's when it's good.
And there's usually depth there.
And there is. There is. And Londo mentions, like, look, if Karn dies, I'm going to start a war. Like, blood calls out for blood. I will start a war with the Narn. Whether it's now, whether it's 20 years from now, I'm a patient man. I can wait, but I will have my revenge for what they're doing today. And Sinclair's like, okay, well, this was a really productive conversation. I'm just going to leave now. And we cut to Garibaldi and Ivanova in the Zocalo. And this is partly just the Raider subplot, but also so that Ivanova has a chance to run away from Talia again.
Yeah.
And Garibaldi has a chance to tell Talia that Ivanova likes to unwind in the casino after work. And so that's probably the best place, which one, yes, is Garibaldi being a bit of a narc.
I think this establishes that Garibaldi is always keeping tabs on everyone.
Yeah.
Like he probably has a little folder for everyone in the command structure and like the prominent, what's the word for
officials?
Citizens.
Yeah.
But they're not citizens, residents.
The people of note. Any person he perceives of as note.
Yeah. People of note, like non-command, non-Babylon 5 employee.
Yeah.
Residents of the station. Yeah. All the prominent people of note.
Yeah.
He's got a little folder on where they live, where they work, where their money comes from, where they spend their time, their known associates.
Yeah. He may not have his fingers in all the pies, but he knows where all the pies are stored.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so if you need to know where somebody is, you can go to Garibaldi, and for the most part, he'll help you out.
Yeah, he more or less knows where they are.
Yeah.
Garibaldi is a good example of when you can have a character who is essentially the comic relief.
Mm-hmm.
He's essentially the lighthearted character, but only on the surface.
Right.
That you can have a plucky side character who is also equally as deep and interesting and introspective as all the other characters.
Like when Garibaldi stops Londo and Londo says, "You don't understand." And
like,
Garibaldi gets real serious and says, "I understand way more than you'll ever know."
Yeah, exactly. And you're like, oh, there's a story there. Oh, that's going to be good.
And we do get it.
And it's the intrinsic trust that I have in J. Michael Straczynski that I know I'm going to get that story.
Mm-hmm.
That as soon as I hear that line, I'm like, oh, I'm going to know. I'm so excited. And then we come back to Sinclair going to get Kosh. And I love this because he puts on his little encounter breather thing. And he walks in. He walks into
There's
his
like
room,
a folding dressing screen.
and there's literally like a garment rack that has the Kosh outfit on it. And it's the capey thing. And then there's like a pole that has his little headpiece because apparently that's a separate piece. So there is a head wearing that piece, I guess.
It's a periscope.
Yeah. And there's a dressing screen, which is a similar texture to, which means he brought it.
Yeah.
He brought that himself or he made it in some way. And there's literally a prop guy behind it with a flashlight shining the flashlight on the screen with the like tinkly Kosh sounds.
Yep.
Does he make those on his own? Is that like it's kind of like a soundboard thing. Like he could probably talk normally or he turns on his little soundboard filter that's like I feel like we need to find out if there is one and add it to our roadcaster.
Oh, yeah.
And then we could do the Kosh voice. The lead up is my favorite. The like right before he talks so that everybody knows he's about to say something. And then it'll just be like, yes. So it's this big long lead up. But the flashlight is on the screen and Sinclair is attempting to interact with it. He's like, so...
They're always trying to get a better look at a Vorlon.
Yeah, Vorlons are... I feel like it's a human nature to want to understand the people that you're interacting with because then you can kind of build a mental model. You know what to expect. And there's no way to do that with Kosh.
Right.
Because he doesn't give you enough information. So Sinclair is talking to the flashlight spot on the screen. And he's like, so, hey, buddy, you coming? We're having a meeting. I wanted to make sure you're going to be there. Does your government, are you going to be there? And he goes, yes. And then Sinclair's like, cool. I'm glad we had this talk. So he turns around to leave and we hear whoosh. And then he looks over and the Kosh thing is standing up. And it just goes, they are alone. They are a dying people. We should let them pass.
They are alone. They are a dying people. We should let them pass.
Who? The Narn or the Centauri?
Yes.
Who?
Yes.
The Narn or the Centauri?
Yes. I love that line. I think about that line a lot.
Yeah.
But they are a dying people. We should let them pass.
Mm-hmm.
That's a good line.
Yep.
Why are we fighting to save them when they are fighting so hard to kill themselves?
Yeah.
What are we fighting for? It's a good thought.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Sometimes it's because you're fighting to save the people they will take down in their quest to kill each other. Like, I don't know, for example, if I'm just going to throw it out there, if you were to say, consume a product that was not properly pasteurized, and you might harm yourself. And part of me says that's an acceptable risk because you as an adult have chosen to do that.
Right.
And yet there is a way that turns around and harms other people.
Right. Like you give it to your kids.
You give it to your kids or you contract a disease that then becomes transmissible. So anyway, it's a interesting thought to just put out into the universe. We come back to Londo. Londo and Veer. Londo and Veer. And Veer is actually the guy who plays Veer. Mm-hmm. He passed away when he was 60.
Oh.
Yeah. Which is kind of sad.
Yeah.
And in the whole first season, he has these really prominent fangs. And he's just, bless this actor.
Struggling to talk around them.
He's trying so hard. And he does a pretty good job, but fangs are difficult. And he's trying to be real emotional.
Mm-hmm.
And they're going to phase these fangs out for him, which is it's a blessing for everyone involved.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Except for Londo.
So if you're like, wow, it's really hard to watch him talk, you don't have to sit through it for very long. They're going to get rid of these. Just like we're going to change up G'Kar's contacts. I think we change up G'Kar's contacts between like episode 1 and episode 2. He goes from having vaguely red eyes
2 and 3
to having like sclera contacts that are red.
Yeah.
They're having an emergency session and Veer is there to collect Londo, but Londo is drunk on the couch. This is a pretty
This is a normal
consistent
state
situation for Londo. And he tries to wake him up and he's like, okay, well, the council can go to hell. Homeworld can go to hell, and you can go to hell too, Veer. I wouldn't want you to feel left out. And Veer's like, what is going on? Why are you like this? I need you together so that we can fight for our colonists.
Right,
and,
so you can do your job.
Right. And he's like, oh, okay, Veer. Well, you want to know? I finally got word from Homeworld after sending them a bunch of messages. And do you want to know what they said? They said, do nothing. Because Ragesh 3 is too small, too far, and too unimportant. And by the time our ships got there, everyone would be dead. And Veer's like, oh yeah,
that's why you're drunk on the couch. Okay.
And Londo's like, actually, let's pretend that we didn't get that message, that we know nothing. And maybe we can guilt them into taking action. I think that sounds like a great plan. I love how everyone bluffs.
Yeah.
This feels very emblematic of what it would probably be like. A lot of just like bluffing and calling bluffs.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody bluffs like Sinclair, but everybody tries.
Right.
So then we come back to Garibaldi and Talia. And I include this because this is one of many instances where people are going to get in a transport tube and Garibaldi will just be in it. He does not get off on any particular stop.
He's not everywhere, but he could be anywhere.
Because Talia gets on the transport tube and Garibaldi is already on it. And she's like, is it me or is Ivanova avoiding me? And
he's so approachable. People can just ask him stuff like, Is it me or is Ivanova avoiding me?
Yeah. And this is when he actually gives her the casino advice. And
Yeah.
then she goes, okay, great. Thank you. Like, thank you for that. Like, I'm going to use that. That's really special. Thank you for telling me. And he goes, yeah. And maybe after that, you could stop by my quarters and see my favorite thing in the universe. And then he goes, oh, all right. My second favorite thing. And she just walks off. And it shuts, and he's still on the transport tube, which means he goes on to terrorize other people.
Yeah.
I love that the Garibaldi character appears to, he has an office. He is ostensibly in charge of all of the security on the ship.
Right. And he has a staff.
Yeah.
He has an entire command structure underneath him of security personnel, but we almost never see them.
Yeah. I think last time we mentioned he may be a little bit on the spectrum. I would argue he's probably a little bit both ADHD and autistic, and probably the thought of sitting at a desk and doing his job is just abhorrent.
Yeah.
So he'd rather be boots on the ground.
Right. Unless he needs to interact with like a screen.
Yeah.
To do his job.
In which case he will. But he's reachable anywhere. He's got his link. So he can be anywhere. He can be found anywhere. So he's always riding the tubes and just probably just stands back and listens to what people are talking about.
Yeah.
Gets the mood of the station.
Oh, or it's like he's so good at using the technology to do his job that he's basically automated his entire job.
Yeah.
And so he's always just tooling around the station and, getting a feel, checking the vibes.
Yeah.
And then anytime anyone's like, God, Garibaldi's never doing his job. I need this information. And he probably doesn't have it for me because, I've checked around. He hasn't been back in his office since like Tuesday. And then they like send him an email. Hey, Garibaldi, can you give me this information, like this report from these days? And like 30 seconds later, an email comes back with all that information.
Yeah. Well, it makes him a very present character. Like it makes him a very present member of security. Everybody knows Garibaldi and everybody knows Garibaldi's face because he's always out, always around.
Yep. Which really, really works.
It's a smart Khmer move. Yeah. And it works for the character. You believe this character would just always be out on patrol effectively. And not that he's the guy who's in the office who dispatches people to be in charge. And then we go to the garden. And the garden set is such an elegant inclusion for a place to have conversations because it is so neutral. Otherwise, we have the Zocalo, which is always busy. Not a great place to have any kind of like deep, meaningful conversation. No one is believably having diplomatic conversations in the Zocalo. Another character's quarters, which wouldn't work because it would involve like deliberately going and meeting those people. And a lot of times the garden is used for serendipitous meetings. Yeah.
And in my mind, there are multiple of these gardens. Yeah. Just because there are so many people on the station. Unless these gardens are only accessible to like command and diplomatic staff.
I can imagine that because one, it'd be very difficult to secure the gardens.
Right. Because they're open.
Because they're completely open
of the station.
And you couldn't risk damage to them because they're like an essential part of food and oxygen reclamation on the station.
Yeah.
So I can see it only being accessible to like members of Earth Force, like high-ranking members of Earth Force and diplomatic staff.
Yeah.
Because Sinclair is already there. And then G'Kar appears and he's like, oh, I see you also like to spend a moment touching grass before you get ready to go into a battle.
Yeah.
And Sinclair doesn't respond. So G'Kar feels compelled to fill the silence, which is probably what Sinclair wanted him to do.
Mm-hmm.
And he goes, we've recently managed to restore a few of the forests on my homeworld. It was all green once, until it was completely stripped bare by the Centauri. This is the thing that makes G'Kar such a compelling character is because he could very easily just be our mustache twirling villain.
Oh yeah, totally.
Our evil race.
He has layers.
He has justification.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, they are being terrible to the Centauri. and they are making overtures of war against the Centauri pretty much constantly.
Right. They're constantly committing acts of aggression, but they're not unreasonable for it.
Yeah, but there's justification. He's not just the mustache twirling bad guy. He is the hurt.
He's been traumatized.
Yeah, he
by
is
the
a
Centauri.
member of a culture that was once peaceful, but was forced to become warlike.
Mm-hmm.
And in terms of their level of aggression, it feels childish because it's very young, because they've just been given power and they don't have a lot of, the only guidance on how to use it is what they have from the Centauri. Their only model that they can follow is the Centauri, and the Centauri were very warlike.
Yeah.
And they probably
so
don't.
They only have this shallow, copy of the Centauri warlike behaviors.
Yeah, what do you perceive as power?
Pulled into their culture. And they don't have a long history with cultures and traditions to kind of control and steer and shape the aggression.
Yeah.
How do you do the violence?
Right. Well, what do you perceive as power? The people who have power over you.
Yeah.
That's how you view power.
Yeah.
And so that's what they view as powerful. That's what they're trying to emulate, whether they realize it or not. And that's what Sinclair calls them out on. He's like, oh, so G'Kar, you're just going to go ahead and do the same now? Like, you're going to do the same to the Centauri? And G'Kar's like, yeah. I would really like to see a universe where the Centauri are completely wiped out and we have carved their bones into little flutes for Narn children. It's a dream I have. And Sinclair goes, you got to be careful. Not every dream I've heard lately ends well for you. And G'Kar's like, what?
Right. He was not expecting anything like that from Sinclair.
No, I think he's expecting a
completely
diplomat.
Pulls him out. Yeah.
And Sinclair is diplomatic, but he is not a diplomat.
Right.
And he turns around and he's like, Sinclair, we supported you guys during the Minbari War. We armed you. We helped you. You owe us. And he goes, no, we don't. Narn will sell to literally anyone who has the credits. You didn't support us. You profited off of us.
Mm-hmm.
So you can shut that shit down right now. And he's like, you know what? My culture, we have a long history with sneak attacks. Pearl Harbor. The terrorist bombing of San Diego. This is pre 9/11, so we don't get to include it, but wouldn't that have been great? Destruction of our first Mars colony. And I love how we just broad stroked a whole bunch of universe in this one sentence.
Yeah.
And he's like, you know what we learned? The sneak attack is the first resort of a coward. He's like, oh yeah, the great Narn military attacking a bunch of unarmed colonists. Ooh, that's a real feather in your fucking cap. And G'Kar's like, I'm sorry, what? And he goes, oh, I'm sorry. Were you upset? Or do you not have the guts for a fair fight, Ambassador? And G'Kar's like, if we were anywhere else, this would be down. And he's like, oh, you know what, actually? If you want to find me, you know where. If you want me, you know where to find me. Anyway, have a great day. And then he leaves. Sinclair's like, oh, you want to throw down? You know where to find me, bitch. And then he leaves. Which I love this.
Poser.
Sinclair is a great character. And I love the guy who's going to take over for him.
Mm-hmm.
But Sinclair has his own charm.
Right.
And I feel bad that this actor had such a difficult time.
Yeah.
That he wasn't able to continue. And he did continue as much as he was able to.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, he was so beloved by J. Michael Straczynski that they offered to take months off of filming to give him an opportunity to go seek treatment.
Right.
And he was concerned that it would lead to the cancellation of the series. So instead, he chose to leave permanently.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just, I don't know. It's just a cool, I know the 90s were tough, but I feel like TV was so different. It was much less of an economic juggernaut.
Right. It was less prestigious work. And it was probably much more beholden to the networks, like from a top-down control perspective of, oh, you stopped making money for us, canceled. Yeah. So they always had to keep up their justification to the network for the network to
and I feel like there was also a level of, at least from the outside looking in, like not kindness necessarily, but because these companies weren't like entertainment companies were not the same. They're not the same. They were not the same economic juggernaut that they are now. You made your money from advertising. So that's what viewership mattered. The viewership wasn't about the show. It was about number of people that tuned into your advertisements.
Right.
And so you could have an actor who needed a minute and you could take the minute. And it wasn't a great idea, but it's just interesting that you could, I don't know. I'm not sure how I'm trying to articulate this. It feels like there's so much content now and it is all so competitive that it's so cutthroat.
Oh, that you just have to keep it up.
Yeah, and the competition for this show was whatever else was playing in its time slot. That's pretty much all it was competing against.
So maybe what I said was less accurate. Maybe it's more of a description of now.
Yeah.
And they had some grace to
and there the expectations were lower, but not in a bad way, but in like because the competition wasn't so fierce.
You could just delay some episodes.
You could get away with a little bit.
Fill it in with something else and then come back. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, I don't know. We're actually getting comments on YouTube now, so I'm not going to comment about that. But anyway, we'll find out. We'll find out. This is just me from my perspective of someone who watches a lot of 90s TV. And I see how Wild Wild West it can be sometimes where they throw these episodes out that you're like, what the fuck? Who wrote that? And it's literally like, hey, my cousin Trina thought maybe she could write an episode for TV. Can I write one? And they're like, yeah, sure. I don't know. And anyway, that's how you end up with Vampire Dog. So Matt just bloop, bloop, blinked at me. Then we get a little bit of boop, boop, Raiders. Oh, no. Because Garibaldi has figured out where the Raiders got their information from. And it's because they sell the transport routes on the market. And this company bought them and then they got hacked. And so all of their routes basically went on the dark web and got bought up by raiders. And so there's another one. It's the last one and it's traveling soon. And oh no, it's supposed to be stuff, but actually it's
originally
refugees.
It was stuff. It was supplies, but a refugee ship bought the route.
Yeah.
Chartered the ship.
Yeah. And so it's actually going to be men, women, and children. Oh no. And that's that. And then we get another moment of Sinclair with the senator in his office.
The senator.
And he's basically like, we can't have this kind of conflict this close to an election. You can't have a position on the Narn Centauri thing.
That would be too disruptive.
How's that going to affect the polls? And he's like, people are dying. And he's like, I don't think that's the issue.
Fake news.
Nice to know that politics doesn't change all that much. And then he pulls a Londo because Ivanova goes to walk in and he tells her to like stay over there because we just established while he was walking around that there's a blind spot because he goes, damn it, I want to see you when I talk to you.
Yeah.
So that Sinclair will walk back into the camera view.
Yep.
And he signs off. Senator leaves and he looks over at Ivanova and he's like, ugh, they want me to abstain. Like this is going to be fucking, I hate this. And Ivanova's like, okay, well, Garibaldi said he's figured out where the Raiders are going to hit next and they're on standby.
He's got a whole fleet of the little fighter ships.
Yeah, the Star Furies.
And
then Garibaldi, she's like, oh, okay, great. Oh, actually, tell Garibaldi I'll be going.
Well, he's explaining some context around his conversation with the senator, and then he has an epiphany.
Yeah.
About connecting the Raiders to the other thing.
Well, I don't think he thinks of. I think it's just to get himself off the ship so that he can't reasonably attend the meeting.
Well, but the epiphany was his conversation with G'Kar about the Narn will sell weapons to anyone, and and they sold big weapons to Earth, and these raiders have bigger weapons than
Reasonable.
raiders usually do.
Yeah.
Oh,
Huh.
I think I know where they got the weapons from.
He's like, actually, I think I'm going to go on this flight. So I'm going to go ahead and go and get, go with Delta Wing. You go represent me at the council meeting. And Ivanova's like, oh, okay, cool. Do you have any instructions? And he's like, oh, tons. But I wasn't able to find you before I left to give you any of them.
To pass on the senator's instructions.
So,
How unfortunate.
Everything's in the docket. You just follow the list and vote your conscience.
The plan that we discussed earlier today, just go forward with that because you didn't get any updates.
Yeah, because I couldn't find you. Weirdest thing. Anyway, have a great day. And he leaves. Then we go to the council meeting. And this is where I was like, oh, this character needed a cape. They gave this character a cape. G'Kar and his
he rocks
fucking
the cape.
I love it. And this is when Delenn is like, okay, so you take the colony. They kill you and take the colony. You kill them and take the colony back.
Right, because G'Kar is explaining for context that this used to be a Narn.
Yeah, he's like, it was
Narn
ours.
colony.
They took it from us. We're just, taking it back.
We're taking it
and
back.
She's like,
we're totally justified in that.
Where does the worm turns? Does it not? Like, where does it end? Where
the worm?
Yes, the worm turns. The world turns. And then we go to the Raiders. Beep boo, the Raiders. That's the basic synopsis. But they find the command and control ship.
Yeah.
That was, these are short range fighters. They had to be docking in some sort of central location. Hey, we found it. And then we come back to the council meeting. And this is when it gets a little close to home political. Because first we had the discussion with the senator where he was like, Earth Force isn't the universe's police. We're not going to just ride in and save everybody. They need to duke this out on their own. That's why we're asking you to abstain, which I feel conflicted about because I don't know. This is a difficult issue, right? Like, where do you allow this to stand? Do you allow people to continue to be harmed? Or where is the line of when you step in? And then we get G'Kar being like, oh, we got this. I have a live broadcast from Ragesh 3 right now. We're going to watch it. And it's Karn Malari saying, well, we had a lot of conflict because we had colonists who were rebelling.
And Homeworld wouldn't send anyone to help.
We contacted Homeworld and Homeworld was like, deuces, we're not coming. Fuck y'all. And so we were forced to contact the Narn regime and ask them to come and take over and establish peace. And the moment of silence after the transmission cuts off is perfection, because it's that moment where literally everybody knows that this was one big lie, that there was probably a guy behind that camera with a gun pointed at Karn Malari, and that he had to perform. And that he was chosen specifically to perform because they knew how he was related to Londo Malari. But there's nothing any of them can do about it.
They're following all of the proper forms and protocols.
Yeah.
That if it was legitimate, they would be doing this.
Yeah.
They would be communicating all the things in the same ways. And so now it's on someone else to prove that he was actually under threat of harm.
Right. It effectively disarms everybody. And even though they all know that this is a lie, there is nothing they can do about it. And then Londo gets this heartbreaking speech where he's like, obviously he was being threatened. He had to say that. You guys can all see that. You know that. And they're all just like uncomfortable sitting there because it's like, yeah, we do. But our hands are fucking tied. Yes, we're friends.
But we have to play it by the book. Like, and the book says we can't do anything.
What can I fucking do? And this is when G'Kar calls Londo out for his lie of omission. He's like, so what about you? Didn't you get a message from your homeworld earlier telling you that they weren't going to do anything? And yet you still allowed us to call this council meeting? And he rocks this line.
He's like, how can you expect us to do something that even your own government
refuses to do?
He doesn't say refuses to do. He said, even your own government feels is inappropriate.
Yeah, and he leans in and whispers to Londo, "This council should not be used for your personal vendetta." Just when G'Kar is doing that.
Oh, yeah.
Right now.
Yeah. And this is exactly the situation where, like, every accusation from a narcissist is an admission.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my God. This whole scene is just. And then G'Kar turns around and he's like, "So I move that we go ahead and dismiss this council because there's nothing left to decide."
Yep.
Check. Game, set, match.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Best part. Whole scene. He makes the motion and then it shows the League of Non-Aligned Worlds, which is all the dudes in masks, and one of them just goes "Meh," and like lifts his hand.
Seconded.
Seconded. They can't talk. That's not, their masks are not flexible, but they
Right.
can just go "Meh." Lifts his little hand. He can't even lift it like off the table. He can just lift his wrist. Just does it. And then, okay, this second part is very dramatic, very terrible. Londo is assembling a gun. They're not allowed to have guns, but he has snuck in a gun in
we've
pieces.
established that there are no civilian weapons.
Yeah. So
Civilian, that's the word I was looking for
there's
earlier.
dramatic music. And he's like, "Blood calls out for blood." And he's pulling all of these pieces.
Out of
One
different
comes
random
off,
things.
one's off his little hanging tassel. One's in the top of a lamp. And then he walks over and he
pulls
just
a whole ass gun out of the base of it.
Everything is in pieces. And then it's like, oh, those weren't pieces. They were just like the cover plates for
Yes.
the actual gun. And it's literally just the gun shoved into the bottom of the lamp.
Yeah.
Like anyone who took too long of a look at this was going to be like, is that
That's a
gun-
gun handle with a trigger sticking out.
It's dramatic, but also it's pretty funny. They were like, "Sorry, we have 48 minutes of runtime. We don't have time for him to find all the pieces. Can we just shortcut this?" And they were like, "I don't know, like the whole gun's in the lamp or whatever."
Mhm.
And like part of it's on his little kettle. Anyway.
Yeah.
And then he just clicks all the pieces on top. And then he's running to G'Kar's quarters because who else is he going to shoot but G'Kar? And he runs into Talia. And
They
Talia
bump into each other.
accidentally sees what he's going to do. And so by the time he gets to G'Kar's place, Garibaldi is there. And Garibaldi just steps out in front of him and he's like, "Where are you going, Londo?" And Londo's like, "Yeah,
Garibaldi, not everywhere, but anywhere.
but anywhere." Never more true. Because where did she find him?
Oh, she just
She probably just
hit him
called
on
a transport tube and he was in it.
she just got on the next elevator
Yeah.
to go to his office, and he
Right.
was on the way down.
Joke's on you, there's like 6 Garibaldis just everywhere at all times.
Well, she probably just called him on the communicator.
Yeah, no, she definitely did that.
Yeah.
Although she doesn't have one because she's not command staff. But
Well,
she could have just...
You just go to the wall and use one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he's like, go home, Londo. And Londo's like, "Get out of the way. I got stuff to do." And he's like, "Listen, don't make me make this official. I'm asking you as your friend. Just go home." And he's like, "You don't understand what's at stake. You don't understand how this feels." And he's like, "Oh, no, I do. More than you'll ever know. But if you shoot, I shoot. And I'll fucking kill you."
Yeah, if you pull a weapon out, I'm going to kill you.
Yeah, I will. I don't care who you are to me. Right now, we are criminal and security officer.
Yeah, right now we're
friends.
We are someone who's feeling a deep emotion and someone who is sympathetic about the emotion you're feeling.
Because I've made
and
mistakes.
willing to give you some compassion.
Yeah.
But if you escalate this, we become criminal and security chief.
Yeah. So don't do that.
Don't test me.
Yeah. And if you kill G'Kar, none of those colonists will get out alive. You have got to know that. You have to realize that. And Londo does. He's like, "Okay, fine. Like, I get it. Okay." Like, he needed someone to interrupt that thought cycle.
Mm-hmm.
And Garibaldi did. And Garibaldi was basically like, "We're bros, but here's my line, man. Don't step over the line." And Londo isn't willing to because complex reasons.
Yeah.
But ultimately, he realizes that this was going to be a mistake. And this is when he says, oh, I guess we're still on track for my appointment 20 years from now. And Garibaldi's like, I don't know what that means, but in an hour, I'm going to come to your quarters and I'm going to do a weapons check. And I'm not going to find anything, am I? And Londo's like, nope, you will find nothing.
Understood.
And then he goes to leave and he turns around and he goes, Mr. Garibaldi, would you have really shot me? And he goes, oh yeah, totes. No, I'd have shot you dead. But I would have hated to do the paperwork. Which is a good example of that like slight diffusion. I'm the funny character. I'm serious. I would have shot you dead, but let me just slight pivot into humor.
Yeah.
That's the Garibaldi character. Always consistently beautifully done. Just that. He's good at his job.
Mm-hmm.
But he does have that slight
And
sense.
his job is keeping people in line.
Right. And he's good at it. And he's good at it because he can maintain rapport.
Mm-hmm.
If he just left
Even
it as...
in stressful situations.
Yeah. Yeah. And then we get the resolution to the whole Ragesh 3, which is once again Sinclair being the bluff king.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's G'Kar in the main office, in Sinclair's office.
Sinclair and Delta Wing chase off the raiders from the refugee ship.
Yeah, yeah. And they find the command and
like,
control.
He's like, Delta 7, whatever, you come with me. But the raiders went the other way. Yeah, exactly what I would do if I had a command and control ship nearby.
Yeah.
It'd be in the opposite direction.
Yeah.
And so they find it and so then they bring in who they found on the command and control ship.
Right, because they found a Narn on there because he remembered that the Narn will sell to anybody, and they usually provide a handler to teach you how to use the thing that they sold you, and also to make sure you don't resell it for more.
Mm-hmm.
And Garibaldi shows up again, which is why I'm like, there's like 6 Garibaldis, because he was just down there trying to keep Londo from shooting G'Kar. And then he pops up and he's like, oh yeah, and I have this handful of data crystals that are full of transmissions that were monitored between the Narn homeworld and Ragesh 3, proving that you guys came there as aggressors and not as liberators. Funny world, isn't it?
How about that?
It'd be really terrible if I was to show these to the other council members and discredit you.
And this is the same dynamic that we just had with Garibaldi and Londo, where it was, I understand that you are feeling some very strong, justified emotions about current events, and I'm willing to give you some grace to resolve this conflict, the current conflict, and we'll just sweep it under the rug. We get the same thing with Sinclair and G'Kar. I understand that you are feeling strong, justified emotions about the current events, but I'm going to give you a chance to resolve the situation, and we can kind of sweep this under the rug and not cause any big downstream consequences because of this.
Yeah.
There'll be a little bit of reparations or whatever. But if you make this better, I won't make it any worse for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm going to do a weapons check in an hour and you're going to have released Ragesh 3, right?
Pretty much.
Oh, totally. And he goes, your choice, Ambassador. You decide. Do I show these to the council or do you go ahead and let Ragesh 3 go? Your choice. Of course, we know what he chooses.
Yeah.
And then later they're walking along. And this is how we knew what they chose because Garibaldi is talking to Sinclair. And he's like, hey, we did it. And he's like, yeah, we did it without sanctions. They told me not to, do sanctions and not be police. And I wasn't police and I didn't do sanctions. So
technically I followed the rules.
And so I technically followed the rules and I got what I wanted. And the polls haven't even closed yet. Ha ha. And then we get a really emotional scene and an important scene. This is another good red string scene because Talia finally meets with Ivanova and has an honest, open conversation with Ivanova. And Ivanova apologizes for being rude. And I have to imagine she feels better because, one, her hair isn't in a braid so tight.
Right.
It feels like it's probably ripping her scalp. And she's not wearing her uniform. She's in her, flowy casino dress, which means she goes home, she changes into her diaphanous shirt and vest combo.
Yes.
And then she heads...
literally lets her hair down.
Yeah, and then heads to the casino
has
for
a couple
drink.
drinks. relaxes a little bit.
And then we get the story of Ivanova's mother. Because Ivanova's mother was a telepath. And this...
Yeah, we get some background on the Psychor.
Yeah, and we get a glimpse into the Psychor. Because we know the Psychor exists.
But we don't really know
Lita
anything.
mentioned it. But Talia, she has her little Psychor badge, but we don't know a lot about the Psychor yet. And this is our first, bloop. The Psychor might not be great.
Yep.
Yeah. And it's...
all telepaths have to be regulated to protect the privacy of everyone else.
Right. Because Ivanova tells her that her mother was a telepath. She wasn't trained. She never could use it very well. And it was her secret. And that when she was 35 years old, the Corps found her. And she had the options of joining the Corps, going to prison, or taking medication that would make her unable to use her telepathic abilities for the rest of her life.
Mm-hmm.
And she didn't want to go to the Corps. She didn't want to go to prison. So she took the medication. And ultimately, it was so hard to take that she took her own life. And Talia's like, yeah, those are the rules. That's the rules. And she goes, oh, were you raised by the Corps? Talia goes, yeah. And she's like, well, then you never had to make that choice. And I'm sorry that I blamed you for what they did. But to me, you are both the face of the Corps and what I hate about the Corps and also a victim. And Talia's like, I don't feel like a victim. And she goes, yeah, I know. And I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. But anyway, I'm glad we had this chat. And Talia's like, cool. So tomorrow we can start as friends. And she's like, oh, no. No. Tomorrow I will begin telling you to fuck off again.
But we can at least start out fresh.
Fresh fuck off, maybe? Yeah, no. Yeah. She's like, no, I'm sorry. No, there's no bridge here. There's no me, you coming together. And that's not, I hate you because I hate the Corps.
Totally never going to happen.
Totally never going to happen.
Ever.
Never. We're never going to. Nope. Anyway. And then Garibaldi finally gets somebody to watch his second favorite thing in the whole universe, and it's Delenn. And I love that Delenn is holding this single piece of popcorn the entire time.
And she doesn't know what to do with it.
And he keeps handing her the popcorn, and she's like, no, thank you. And she's got it.
And yeah, I like how this kind of establishes that Delenn is always down to learn more about Earth culture, about humans in general.
Yeah. The Minbari are pretty, that's why they remind me
Curious.
of space Japanese, because they're very like, oh, this is a cool cultural thing. Let me take a minute and
learn to appreciate it.
Yeah, I'll learn about this. This sounds really interesting. And she's like, can you explain this part to me again? And it's when he puts like the ship in reverse and it goes down into the earth instead of out. And Garibaldi's just enjoying it too much to really explain it. But it's just a funny moment of this. Yeah, in Star Trek, we get a lot of like lofty meetings where it's like, we have come together and now we will share our entire culture. But it's like, how would an alien take duck dodgers? How would a entirely other race that has absolutely no similar cultural experience, would they be able to understand our comedy?
Mm-hmm.
No, of course they wouldn't. And so that's what I love about Babylon 5. It's the very like, you take a modern human and you put them in the presence of an alien, what's that going to look like?
Yeah. How
are we going to find common ground? And how are they even going to be able to understand popcorn?
Right.
Yeah. A non-nutritive thing that you snack on when you watch TV. Like, they don't have an equivalent. So how can they understand that? And then we work in the results of the election at the very end. And it's because Sinclair is getting ready for bed and he puts on the news. And we find out that Luis Santiago won. And he won on a platform of emphasizing preserving Earth culture in light of non-Terran influences. Oh, and also cutting the budget.
Yep.
And keeping Earth out of war.
Yep.
And then the lights go out. The lights go out on the TV. And then we hear beep, beep. Sinclair, we've got a problem. And it's the end of the episode. Right. It's just like he never gets a break. And that's episode 1 of season 1 of Babylon 5.
Woo! The first official episode. Was the pilot aired?
The pilot was aired like a year before the show started. So chronologically it works.
Right, but this would have been the first episode that regular watchers would have seen.
Yeah. If you didn't catch the pilot the year previous, this would have been the first episode.
Yeah.
Which there's a couple nods in the next coming episodes to the pilot, but honestly, you can skip the pilot. The only thing you miss out on is like a couple of things.
Yeah.
Like when boop. Just gonna leave it there. Yeah, I don't know. I feel like I've watched this episode a lot because every time I sit down, and you cannot just pick an episode of Babylon 5 and watch it.
Right. Not like a lot of 90s TV.
Not like a lot of where you're like, oh, I love that episode. They're not standalone novellas.
Right. It's not like a sitcom.
Right. So I always start at episode 1, and then episode 2 usually breaks. I'm like, I got to take a break. And then I forget to go back because the next episode is probably one of my least favorite of the series.
Yeah.
Every time I think about watching Babylon 5, I'm like, oh, I'm going to skip that one though. I mean, it's a fine episode, but it's just one of those. I don't know. The guy who played the character that bothers me is very committed to his very slow speech. It's so difficult. Low, quick, slow. And you're like, I am going to die of old age before you finish this sentence. Anyway, that's just me personally, probably. It's an issue. It's like the one thing I don't love is that character. But he's necessary. Like I recognize his importance. And it's okay to have criticism of a thing and still love the thing. Oddly enough. So, how do you feel exiting this episode and moving into the series proper?
I'm ready to watch more.
I know, me too. In fact, we watched it and I was like, should we just watch the next episode? And I was like, yeah, maybe. It's good. I love Babylon 5 so much. I love that. I love going back and rewatching it. That's probably one of my favorite things about it is watching it the first time is like, oh my God, this is so good. And then you go back and watch it again and you're like, I didn't even realize how good this was.
Right.
How could I? I couldn't see all the connections. And now when I go back, I can. And I think that's probably a good place to leave it. Hey, we're sub 2 hours.
Woohoo.
I feel like
That's an accomplishment.
We didn't commit to this.
I think we much more deliberately avoided spoilers.
It was a little easier.
Yeah.
Yeah, because there's enough to talk about without having to talk about how these things relate to what's going to happen. And yet,
And I think we'd already spent a lot of time introducing the characters.
well, and so much of what's happening in season 1 is building blocks, but I don't feel like you really, it's good. I love season 1 just fine. I like season 2 onward better. And that's okay. You need season 1. You can't skip it because there's going to be stuff that happens in season 1 that if you don't know about it, you're going to be confused later on. I mean, you'll feel okay, but there'll be that like, huh? Wait a minute. How did we get to that? Huh? I missed it. But the establishment of the Londo G'Kar dynamic in season 1 is essential.
Yeah.
You have to get that. And they nail it so perfectly. And that's why I always feel conflicted when I think about a remake of Babylon 5, because I know they've talked about it.
Yeah.
But the magic that is those two actors in that moment in time with that much creative freedom, I don't know that you could ever get that back.
No, that would be a really, really hard thing to nail.
Yeah. But stepping in those shoes again would be so difficult. So I'm just going to leave it at that. We live for the one.
We die for the one.
Until next time, friends.
Bye.